Good evening and welcome to Gothic at Midnight, or more precisely, Gothic at 7:35. My name is Joshua Kane, and I travel all over the country performing evenings of Gothic horror. It's a tough job, but somebody has got to do it. Before I came on stage this evening, a young man asked me, how does one get into a lifestyle of performing Gothic horror? And the answer is actually very simple. Perverted grandparents. You see, when I was 12 years old, my grandfather and grandmother came to live with us. And my grandfather gave to me for my Christmas present. And believe me, being a nice Jewish boy, getting a Christmas present is a very special thing indeed. He gave to me the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. Cruel man that he was. And I immediately fled up to the attic, which is where the family hid me when the neighbors came. And I proceeded to read my way through the complete works of Poe. And this is where I got my ideas about life and relationships. Then there was my grandmother. Everybody should have such a grandmother. My grandmother was from Russia. She's a Russian. That's why she's from Russia. And my grandmother was convinced that if her grandchildren were going to grow up into great, big, strong, brave Americans in the John Wayne tradition, that it was a solemn duty to scare the living hell out of us every chance she got. So my grandmother would come into my bedroom in the dead of night bearing a lit candle. She did not believe in electricity unless it was lightning. And I would scrunch up my eyelids and pray to God that she would just go away and leave me alone. And she would walk over and she would pry open my eyelids, one at a time, and proceed to tell me the most grisly, gruesome stories imaginable. Stories about werewolves vivisecting a small child. Stories about a little boy staked out spread-eagled in the Mojave Desert by Red Indians, with his eyelids cut away so the eyeballs would dry and crack in the desert sun, leaving gaping sockets for the red fire ants to crawl in and feast upon his wee little brain. And the really twisted part was the child always had the name of Joshua. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, every moment, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In another moment, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for some minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. And the old man raised his hands high into the icy moonlight, and long black fingernails, as long and sharp as kitchen knives, grew up and out of his fingertips, and he plunged his fingers down through his snowy white hair, and he pulled his head open and apart, and he stepped out of the old man's body, showing himself to really be a hideous, glistening monster that was Totan Glendock. And the monster reached deep into his belly, and he pulled out his insides, yard by yard by yard, until he held a great glistening mass of string on his fingertips. It was the string figure, Totan Glendock. And the little boy trembled with fear as the monster raised his hands high above his head to capture him, to take away the little boy forever. When the little boy's father awoke, and Totan Glendock vanished into the string. Now, when that little boy wakes up in the middle of the night, he goes back to sleep. Which is what all little boys should do. Otherwise, Totankunak might challenge you to a game of string story. So do you know, Caitlin, that a rat with a body dimension of 23 inches can squeeze itself through a hole the size of a quarter and come into your house? Did you know that a rat has enough power in its teeth to chew through concrete, steel pipes, that there's nothing strong enough that rats can't chew through? That rats can swim backwards through the water pipes and come into your house through the toilet? Did you know that, Caitlin? But I bet you'll look before you sit down next time, won't you? Caitlin, did you know that you can take a rat and you can drop it off of a 40-story building? The rat will splurch out, reassemble itself, and walk away smiling? Now you know. I'm from New York, Caitlin. We have big rats. Our rats are so big, we take the tourists riding on them. Would you like me to send you one from New York? Come on, Caitlin. Haven't you ever had a rat all sweaty and covered with disease crawl up your leg, sit in your lap, and chuck under your chin for a kiss? Wait till you date boys, it's worse. You see, Satan was a Democrat. And the Lord God was a high Republican. Satan did not believe that Adam and Eve were virtuous, being goody-good all the time, without the opportunity to sin if they chose to. So Satan wanted God to give them the freedom of choice. But the Lord God, being a high Republican, was not pro-choice. So she rolled out the pie crust, never once taking her eyes off of him, watching him narrowly all the while until he cut off her head, chopped her in pieces, peppered her, salted her, flavored her with the garlic, put her in the pie, baked the pie, ate the pie, and picked the bones. But before she began to roll out the paste, she had taken a deadly poison of most awful character, distilled from toads' eyes and spiders' knees. And Captain Murderer had hardly finished picking her last bone when he began to swell and to turn blue, and to be spots all over, and to scream. And he kept on swelling and turning bluer and being more all over spots and screaming until he reached from floor to ceiling and from wall to wall. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, he blew up with a loud explosion. Good night, child.